In philosophy, there's a thought experiment called the ship of Theseus, in which one wonders whether a ship that has had all of its parts replaced over time is still the same ship. That's how I'm starting to feel about my shop. I have the shop of Theseus. Let's take a look at all the changes I've been making lately. First of all, I've upgraded my electrical service to the shop from 100 amps to 200. This required changing everything that had previously been there. The panel inside, the meter base outside, the weather head, and the service line itself. Thankfully, that last one was covered by the power company, otherwise it would have been prohibitively expensive. I'd really like to thank my friend Larry for helping with all this. Not only did he source all of the necessary parts and do pretty much all of the installation, but he also happened to have a spare 200 amp panel laying around that he donated. Thank you very much, Larry. I've also framed in the ceiling of the shop, at least on the portion of the shop that I can reach right now. Once I get my machines moved, I'll be able to tackle the other side of the ceiling. The next step is to put house wrap on the underside, and then I'll be installing the old roof tin as the ceiling. That tin is currently dark gray, which wasn't a particularly good roof color, but it's an even worse ceiling color. I'll paint the tin white before I put it up, so it'll reflect more of the lighting that will go up afterwards. I'll also be installing air lines once the ceiling is in place, and I'll eventually blow insulation into the attic cavity. This whole process has been a juggling act. Almost every step has depended on something else happening first, and a big part of that was replacing the only window in the shop. The old window was very poorly installed and leaked like a sieve because it had no flashing around it whatsoever. As you can see, I had to replace all of the wood surrounding it because it had rotted away, and once again I have a friend to thank for their help. My carpenter buddy Jerome really came in clutch here, and I can't thank him enough. He's been giving me a ton of other carpentry tips throughout this, and he's been a great resource. I can proudly say the new window's 100% leak-free, and that's allowed me to play some more machine Tetris and move all my woodworking tools over here by the window. Speaking of leaks, I had 2 large holes in the wall where exhaust fans had been, and those needed to be patched before I could start insulating the walls. Unfortunately, the tin on the exterior walls is no longer made, and the odds of finding any of it on the used market are incredibly slim. Thankfully, I already had some on the sliding door. I'm planning on replacing this door with an overhead door as soon as I can afford it, so in the meantime, I reskinned it using some scratch and dent metal roofing that I got for really cheap. I also took the time to replace some of the boards on it that were in rough shape, and I added these turnbuckles to help keep it tight against the building. That makes it a little bit harder to open, but it'll help keep the larger critters out of my shop and prevent the wind from damaging the door. As you can imagine, I had to get quite a bit of help with this one because it was a pretty big job, so I'd like to give a huge shout out to my friends John, Kenton, Randy, and Zach. All told, it took us about 14 hours to get everything done, and I could not have done it without their help. Once I had the old door tin off, I could look at patching those exhaust fan holes. I originally wanted to replace the entire sheet, but the spacing on the horizontal stringers on the door is different than the spacing on the walls, so the nail holes didn't line up. I settled on cutting the wall just above the holes and removing the damaged tin. So in order to fix the hole, I had to make a bigger hole so I could have no hole. These have been open for quite a long time, and just like over by the window, there was a lot of water damage to the walls, so I cut it all out and framed in new boards as best I could. I also added extra boards that lined up with the old nail holes in the patches. I figured it would be better to seal those holes with screws rather than caulk. The screws I'm using are specifically made for pole barns, and they have a rubber washer under the head to seal it against the elements. Patching these didn't take that long actually, about 2 or 3 hours each. I did have to wait for a day without a lot of wind though, which is pretty rare in central Illinois. Those holes were a massive obstacle to moving on with the rest of the build since I couldn't start insulating the walls until they were sealed up. The smaller of the two was also where my office is going to be, and I don't want to move my machines until the office is built because I don't want to be doing construction with the machines in the way. For the insulation, I'm using foam board in between the wall purlins. At first, I was trying to put the pieces in whole by working them behind one pole and then tapping it back behind the other one, but this was an exercise in frustration. It took a long time to install each one, and it really tore up the sheets. I switched to cutting them in half and having a seam in the middle. This sped up installation significantly, although the pieces didn't necessarily want to stay where I had put them. I put some strips of wood across the face to keep them in the cavity, and then I plan to use expanding foam around all the gaps. I really hit this hard because the stack of foam boards has been taking up valuable floor space, and I need all that clear so I can start working on the ceiling. I'll also be putting stud walls in each of these bays, which I plan on starting very shortly. That will whittle down the giant stack of lumber I have in my way. Those walls will also be insulated, so this is only the first layer. This brings us up to where I am now, and to the most important thank you of all of my viewers here on YouTube, and especially all of my supporters over on Patreon. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this journey. I know I haven't been posting a lot of videos since I moved, but trust me, I'm working really hard to get the shop usable so I can get back to what you really want to see. I do have some videos in the works that are coming out soon-ish, including the start of my second rust inhibitor test, as well as videos covering ring and plug gauges for threading, lathe tool geometry and tool grinding, and a pretty comprehensive look at deburring tools. Stay tuned, and thanks again for watching.